The Willamette River sparkles under the Portland sun, its waters carrying secrets as old as the city itself. I'm Betty, a 73-year-old retired teacher, sipping coffee on my porch, a blueberry muffin crumbling in my hand as birds chatter in the maple trees. It's 2025 now, but my story begins in 1968 when I was just 16, and Portland was a simpler place. Unpaved streets, church dances, and dreams that felt as boundless as the river. I'm sharing this tale buried deep in my heart for nearly 5 decades to remind you that sometimes the love you think will save you can lead you to the edge of ruin. Stick with me, my dears, and if you feel moved, comment below with a piece of your own story. Maybe the city you call home or a dream you once chased. Let's weave our stories together. Back in 1968, Portland was a working-class town alive with the hum of lumber mills and the scent of pine. Electricity was spotty, and we made our own fun Sunday square dances in the town square where fiddles sang and laughter echoed. I was a fisherman's daughter raised by my father Gerald after my mother passed when I was 8. With 6 sisters, our home was strict but warm, filled with hand-sewn quilts and the clatter of supper plates. At one of those dances, I met Frank. Tall, strong from millwork, with a smile that could charm the stars, he swept me off my feet. "A pretty girl like you shouldn't be alone," he said, his voice smooth as river stones. My heart raced, naive and hungry for something special. Frank was 20, an office assistant at a lumber company, earning enough to wear neat suits and a splash of cologne that lingered like a promise. He courted me properly, sitting on our sofa with the living room door open, my father's hawk eyes watching. Gerald didn't trust him. "That boy's eyes shine too bright," he warned, pipe smoke curling. "They hide shadows." But I was 16, drunk on love, and I begged until father relented. Frank brought me wildflowers, tied ribbons in my hair, and spoke of a future gleaming like the Willamette on a summer day. 6 months later, he proposed. Father sat in his rocking chair, pipe clenched, and asked, "Will you care for my daughter?" Frank's reply was firm, "I'll make her the happiest woman in Oregon." Our wedding was simple, held at St. Sebastian's Church, with a backyard reception, barbecue, beer, and a 3-tier cake my sisters baked with love. We moved into a 2-room house near the mill, the bathroom a wooden outhouse, but to me, it was a palace. Those first weeks were a dream. Frank came home with small gifts, a peach, a candy, a new ribbon. We'd lie awake whispering about our future, our bodies learning the language of love. I thought it would last forever. But rivers, even the calm ones, hide currents that can pull you under. I want to pause here, my dears, to invite you into this journey. This story isn't just mine, it's for anyone who's ever trusted too deeply or faced a betrayal that cut to the bone. If you're watching, hit that subscribe button, tap the bell, and drop a comment. Tell me where you were born, how many kids or grandkids you have, or just something unique about you. I read every word, and it warms my heart to connect with you. Oh, and our channel's got a $500 giveaway for subscribers who engage. Check the description for details. Let's keep this community growing. Back then, I didn't see the shadows in Frank's eyes, the ones my father warned about. He worked hard, yes, but there was a restlessness in him, a hunger I mistook for ambition. I was too young to know that love could be a mask, hiding truths that would unravel everything. By the time I was 17, I was pregnant, my heart swelling with dreams of a family. I told Frank over a special dinner pot, roast his favorite, with a flower on the table. His eyes lit up and he spun me around our tiny room, promising to be the best father. "It's a boy," he said, certain. "A strong lad like me." I believed him, my hands resting on my belly, imagining a little face with his smile. Portland in those days was changing, the lumber industry booming, but life for us was still modest. My sisters visited, bringing baby clothes and blankets, their chatter filling our small home. I'd sit by the window watching the river, singing lullabies to the life inside me. Frank was attentive at first, bringing home fruits I craved, but soon I noticed shifts, late nights, excuses, a faint perfume on his collar. Over time, he'd say, waving off my questions. I wanted to believe him, to hold tight to the love that felt so real. But doubt, like a river's undercurrent, was starting to pull at me. This story will take us through pain, my dears, but also through the strength that rises from it. I've learned that life, like the Willamette, keeps flowing no matter how dark the night. As we move forward, I'll share how that love I trusted turned into a nightmare and how I found my way back to the light. Stay with me, and let's discover together how even the deepest wounds can lead to purpose. The air in our little house by the mill carried the scent of pine and promise, but beneath it, something was shifting. I was 17, newly married, and still dizzy with the memory of our wedding day at St. Sebastian's Church. The ceremony was humble, my dress, a hand-me-down from my sister Sarah, the pews filled with family and a few mill workers. In my father's backyard, we danced under strung-up lanterns, the 3-tier cake my sisters baked tasting of love and hope. Frank's arm around me felt like a vow stronger than the words we'd spoken. But as the weeks turned to months, I began to sense shadows in his smile, hints of a man I didn't yet know. Portland in 1968 was a city of grit and dreams. The Willamette River wound through it like a lifeline, its banks lined with mills that hummed day and night. Our 2-room home was modest, a combined living room and kitchen, a bedroom with a creaky bed and an outhouse out back. I'd sweep the floors, humming hymns from church, imagining the family we'd build. Frank left early for the lumber company, his suit crisp, his cologne sharp. When he came home, he'd bring small tokens, a pear, a ribbon, a kiss that lingered. Those moments made me believe we were crafting something eternal. But love, my dears, can blind you to the cracks forming beneath. Frank's late nights started to pile up. Paperwork, he'd mutter, loosening his tie, his eyes avoiding mine. I'd nod, stirring stew on our tiny stove, ignoring the faint whiff of perfume that wasn't mine. My father's warning echoed eyes that shined too bright, hide shadows, but I pushed it down. I was young, desperate to believe in the man who'd promised me the world. At night, I'd trace the curve of my belly, not yet swollen, whispering to the future I thought was certain. Our community was tight-knit, centered around church and the rhythms of the mill. Sundays meant square dances or potlucks where women swapped recipes and men talked lumber prices. My sisters, especially Sarah, were my anchors, their visits filling our home with laughter. They'd tease Frank about his charm, but Sarah's eyes lingered watchful. "He's good to you, Betty?" she asked, once her voice low. I laughed it off, showing her the latest ribbon he'd brought. But her question planted a seed, one that would grow in the quiet moments when Frank wasn't there. I want to invite you, my dears, to share a piece of your own journey. Drop a comment, maybe the place you fell in love, or a moment that changed you. Your stories weave into mine, making this tale ours. And don't forget our $500 giveaway. Subscribe, hit the bell like this video, and comment to join. It's a small way to keep our community alive. Just like those Portland potlucks kept us connected. Frank's charm was his weapon, and he wielded it well. At the mill, he was rising fast, trusted with ledgers and deals. Neighbors admired him, calling him a good provider. But at home, his warmth began to flicker. He'd snap over small things, burnt toast, a misplaced shirt, then apologize with a grin that melted my doubts. I'd tell myself it was the pressure of work, the weight of our new life. I'd lie awake, listening to his steady breaths, wondering if I was imagining the distance growing between us. One evening, as summer faded, I found a lipstick smudge on his collar, faint but undeniable. "Ink," he said, laughing when I held it up, my voice trembling. "You're seeing things, Betty." I wanted to believe him, to cling to the man who danced with me under the lanterns. But the seed Sarah planted was sprouting, fed by late nights and half-truths. I'd sit by the window, watching the river's current, feeling my own life pulling in directions I couldn't control. My father, Gerald, sensed it too. He'd visit his fisherman's hands, rough but gentle, and watch Frank with narrowed eyes. "You're happy, girl?" he asked one Sunday, his pipe smoke curling. I nodded too quick, my smile tight. He didn't press, but his silence spoke volumes. Frank, oblivious or uncaring, would clap father's shoulder, promising to take me fishing soon. Those promises, like so many others, never came true. As fall painted Portland in golds and reds, I realized I was pregnant. The midwife, Mrs. Ruth, confirmed it with a warm smile. A baby before spring, she said, her hands gentle on my belly. Joy flooded me, a light brighter than any doubt. I planned a special dinner, pot roast potatoes, a daisy in a glass, to tell Frank. When he walked in, his tie loose, I couldn't hold back. "We're having a baby?" I said, my voice breaking with happiness. His eyes sparked, and he lifted me off the floor, spinning me. "A boy," he declared. "Frank Jr., strong, like his dad." For that moment, the shadows vanished, and I saw the man I'd married. But rivers don't stay calm forever. Frank's excitement faded faster than I expected. He'd leave earlier, return later, his gifts replaced by excuses. I'd cradle my belly, singing to the life inside, trying to drown out the questions piling up. Was this the love I'd dreamed of? Was this the future I'd seen in his eyes? I didn't know then that the man I loved was slipping away, leaving a stranger in his place. This journey, my dears, isn't just about love's beginning, but its unraveling. Stay with me as we follow the current through joy and pain to see how a heart can break and still find its way. The Willamette keeps flowing, and so must we, carrying our hopes and hurts toward whatever lies ahead. The Willamette River shimmered outside our window, its steady flow, a contrast to the unease growing in my heart. I was 17, my belly just beginning to round with the promise of our child, and every kick inside me felt like a whisper of hope. Portland in 1968 was a city of labor and faith, its mills churning and churches filled on Sundays. Our little house by the mill was my world, where I stitched baby clothes and dreamed of a family bathed in love. Frank, though, was drifting, his warmth cooling like the autumn air, and I clung to the belief that our baby would bring him back to me. Pregnancy filled me with a joy I can still taste, like the blueberries in my mother's pies. I'd sit by the river, hands on my belly, imagining a boy with Frank's smile or a girl with my curls. Mrs. Ruth, the midwife, checked me monthly, her hands steady as she nodded. "Strong heartbeat," she'd say. "This one's eager to meet you." My sisters buzzed around, bringing booties and blankets, their chatter drowning out my worries. Sarah, always the sharpest, watched Frank closely, but said little, her silence louder than words. Frank's reaction to the news had been everything I'd hoped. That night, over pot roast, he'd spun me around, his laughter filling our tiny home. Frank Jr., he insisted, already planning a crib he'd build himself. But as my belly grew, his promises thinned. He'd leave before dawn, claiming early meetings, and return late, his eyes dodging mine. "Big orders at the mill," he'd say, brushing off my questions. I'd nod, stirring soup, ignoring the faint perfume on his shirt or the lipstick smudge he called ink. Love, my dears, can make you blind, and I was too young to see the truth. I want to pause here to connect with you. This story is heavy, but it's also about hope. Share a piece of yours in the comments, maybe a dream you had for a child, or a moment of joy that carried you through. Subscribe, hit the bell, and like this video to join our $500 giveaway, details below. Your stories weave into mine, making this journey ours, like the river binding Portland's shores. My days were spent preparing for the baby. I'd sew tiny gowns, humming lullabies my mother sang, while the river's murmur kept me company. My father, Gerald, visited often, his fisherman's hands gentle as he felt my belly. A strong one, he'd say, but his eyes lingered on Frank, searching. Frank would charm him, promising fishing trips that never happened, and I'd smile, pretending all was well. But at night, alone in our creaky bed, I'd trace the space where Frank should be, wondering why his side was so often cold. The mill was booming, and Frank's job as an office assistant kept him busy, or so he said. Neighbors praised him, calling him a provider, but I saw the cracks. He'd snap over small things, a late dinner, a creased shirt, then apologize with a grin that once melted me. I'd tell myself it was stress, that the baby would fix everything. My sisters helped me paint the bedroom corner for a crib, their laughter a balm. "He'll come around," Sarah said, but her eyes didn't match her words. By the third month, my morning sickness eased, but a new weight settled in. Frank's gifts stopped replaced by excuses. He'd stumble home late smelling of whiskey, his stories tangled. Fell asleep at the office, he'd mutter, avoiding my gaze. I'd lie awake, the baby's kicks my only comfort, wondering if I'd misread the man I loved. My father's warning eyes that hide shadows haunted me, but I pushed it down, clinging to the dream of our family. One Sunday after church, I found a note in Frank's coat pocket, a woman's handwriting, a time and place. My heart sank, but I folded it away, too scared to ask. Instead, I focused on the baby naming possibilities with Sarah James, for a boy, Lily, for a girl. Frank, when I asked, insisted on Frank Jr., his voice sharp. No girls, he'd say, frowning as if the idea offended him. I'd laugh it off, but the knot in my chest tightened. Portland's fall was vibrant leaves, painting the city in fire, but my world felt gray. My blood pressure crept up, and Mrs. Ruth urged rest. No stress. Betty, she said, her eyes kind but firm. How could I avoid stress when Frank was a stranger in our home? I'd walk by the river, whispering to my baby, promising a life of love. But doubt was a current pulling me under, and I didn't know how to fight it. This tale, my dears, is about more than a baby. It's about the dreams we build and the truths that shatter them. The Willamette keeps flowing, and so must we, through joy and fear, toward whatever lies ahead. Stay with me as we follow this path, where love's promise meets its betrayal, and a mother's heart fights to hold on. The Willamette's current churned outside our window, its restless flow mirroring the unease in my heart. I was 17, my belly, now a proud curve, the baby's kicks, a constant reminder of the life I was building. Portland, in 1968, was a city of sweat and faith, its mills grinding and churches offering solace. Our small house, once a haven, felt like a stage where Frank played a role that no longer fit. His late nights and sharp words were eroding my trust, but I clung to the hope that our child would anchor him back to us. My pregnancy was a mix of wonder and strain. Morning sickness had faded, but my body ached, my feet swollen from the weight of carrying life. Mrs. Ruth, the midwife, checked me often, her hands steady, but her brow creased. Your blood pressure's climbing, she warned. Rest, Betty, and keep worry at bay. Easier said than done. Frank's absences grew bolder, whole evenings gone with excuses as thin as the paper they were written on. Client meetings, he'd say, or stuck at the office. I'd nod, stirring soup, ignoring the perfume on his collar, the lipstick smudge he swore was a pen mark. I want to reach out, my dears, and hear your stories. Have you ever felt trust slip through your fingers? Share a moment in the comments. Maybe a time you held on to hope despite the signs. Subscribe, hit the bell, and like this video to join our $500 giveaway, details in the description. Your voices weave into this tale like the river tying Portland's banks together. Frank's charm still worked on others. At the mill, he was a rising star, trusted with ledgers and deals. Neighbors called him a good man, but at home his mask slipped. He'd snap over burnt toast or a misplaced tie, his apologies less convincing each time. I'd lie awake, the baby's kicks my only solace, wondering if the man I loved was gone. My father, Gerald, saw it too. He'd visit, his fisherman's eyes scanning Frank. You're all right, girl, he'd ask, pipe smoke curling. I'd force a smile, but his silence spoke louder than words. By the 5th month, the cracks were undeniable. Frank came home later, sometimes not at all, claiming he'd slept at the office. The money he once brought home dwindled, barely covering rent and groceries. His touch, once warm, was rare, his eyes avoiding mine. I'd cradle my belly, singing lullabies to drown out the fear. Sarah, my sharp-eyed sister, brought whispers from town. People saw Frank with a woman near the mill, she said, her voice low. A secretary, they say. I waved it off, calling it gossip, but her words sank deep, feeding the doubt I couldn't shake. My health faltered under the strain. Headaches plagued me. My hands and feet swelled, and Mrs. Ruth's visits grew urgent. This is pregnancy-induced hypertension, she said. dangerous if you don't rest. I tried, but how could I rest when my home felt like a battlefield? I'd walk by the river, the Willamets murmur, my companion whispering, promises to my baby, a life of love no matter what. But the weight of Frank's distance pressed heavier than my belly, and I felt myself sinking. One night, he came home at dawn, reeking of whiskey, his shirt rumpled. "Where were you?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Working, Betty," he snapped. "Your pregnancy's making you paranoid." His words cut, but I swallowed them, too scared to push. I found another note in his pocket, a woman's scrawl, a meeting place, and hid it, my heart pounding. I wanted to believe it was nothing, that the man who'd spun me around our kitchen still existed. But the river's current was pulling us apart, and I didn't know how to stop it. My sisters rallied around me, their visits a lifeline. Sarah helped paint the baby's corner, her hands steady, but her eyes searching. "He's different, Betty," she said softly. "You see it, don't you?" I nodded, tears stinging, but I couldn't say it aloud. Admitting it felt like betraying the dream I'd built. Instead, I focused on the baby James or Lily, I'd whisper, stitching tiny clothes. Frank, when he was home, insisted on Frank Jr., his voice sharp. "It's a boy," he'd say, as if daring me to argue. Portland's winter loomed, the air sharp with frost, but my world was colder. I'd sit by the window watching the river, feeling the baby's kicks like messages from a world still pure. Mrs. Ruth's warnings grew sterner. Rest, no salt, no stress, but Frank's behavior was a storm I couldn't escape. I'd pray at night, my hands on my belly, asking for strength. My father's words, eyes that hide shadows, rang truer each day, but I wasn't ready to face what they meant. This journey, my dears, is about the slow unraveling of trust, the weight of hope against truth. The Willamette flows on, and so must we, through doubt and fear, toward a reckoning we can't yet see. Stay with me as we navigate this current where love's facade crumbles and a mother's resolve begins to rise. The Willamette's waters churned under Portland's gray winter sky, their restless flow echoing the storm brewing in my heart. I was 17, 6 months pregnant, my belly heavy with the child I'd sworn to protect. The city in 1968 was a tapestry of mill smoke and church bells, but our little house by the river felt like a cage. Frank's absences had become brazen, his lies flimsy, and the truth I'd tried to ignore was clawing its way to the surface. I was teetering on the edge of a revelation that would shatter my world, but my love for my unborn baby gave me a strength I didn't know I had. Frank's disappearances were no longer just late nights. He'd vanish for days, leaving me alone with my swollen feet and racing thoughts. Business trips, he'd mutter, when he returned reeking of whiskey and perfume that wasn't mine. The money he brought home barely covered rent, and I'd ration potatoes to stretch our meals. My sisters, especially Sarah, saw the strain. "He's not right, Betty," she whispered during a visit, her eyes fierce. "People talk Frank's been seen with a woman, a secretary named Marlene." I snapped that it was gossip, but her words lodged in my chest like a stone. I want to connect with you, my dears. Have you ever faced a truth you weren't ready for? Share a moment in the comments, maybe a time you had to choose between denial and courage. Subscribe, hit the bell, and like this video to join our $500 giveaway, details below. Your stories weave into mine like the river binding Portland's shores. My health was crumbling under the weight of doubt. Mrs. Ruth, the midwife, grew stern during her visits. "Your blood pressure's dangerous," she said, her hands gentle but firm. "Preeclampsia's a risk now. Rest, Betty, and no stress." I tried, but Frank's coldness was a poison. I'd find notes in his pockets, scrawled times, places a woman's hand. I hid them, too scared to confront him, but each one chipped away at the dream I'd built. I'd sit by the river, the Willamette's murmur, my only comfort, whispering to my baby, "I'll keep you safe, James or Lily." Then came the week that broke me. Frank didn't come home for 7 days. No word, no note, nothing. I was 6 months along, my belly large, my body aching. Desperate, I waddled to the mill asking for him. He took time off, a clerk said. Said a relative was sick. Sick relative Frank's family lived in Portland. The lie stung raw and undeniable. I returned home collapsing in tears, the baby's kicks my only anchor. Sarah found me there, her face hardening. Enough, Betty, she said. You can't stay like this. My father Gerald took me in. He carried me to my childhood bedroom, his fisherman's hands steady, and my sisters rallied around. You're strong, Father said, pipe smoke curling. You'll raise this child with or without him. I wanted to believe him, but hope clung stubbornly to my heart. On the 8th day, Frank appeared at Father's door, unshaven eyes sunken. He asked to speak alone. In the backyard, I faced him, my belly between us. Where were you? I demanded. Seattle mill business, he lied, his voice flat. I pressed, citing the mill's story. He faltered, then admitted personal matters. But I'm back. Come home. I went not out of love, but necessity. 7 months pregnant, I had no job, no money, and a society that shamed unwed mothers. Our house felt hollow. Frank's presence a shadow. He barely hid his comings and goings, the money dwindling further. I focused on the baby sewing clothes, ignoring the whispers from neighbors. Then Mrs. Josephine, a mill cleaner, came to me, her eyes heavy with pity. Betty Franks with Marlene, the new secretary. Everyone knows. They say she's waiting for him to leave you after the baby's born. The truth hit like a blow. I leaned against the wall, pain shooting through my belly, black spots dancing in my vision. Marlene pregnant too, they said, with Frank's child. He'd built a new life while I carried his son. I thanked Mrs. Josephine, my voice steady, and sat in the rocking chair, caressing my belly. Something shifted in me, a door slamming shut. That night, when Frank came home early, I served dinner, silent planning. I wouldn't confront him, not yet. My baby came first. My health worsened, headaches, blinding swelling, distorting my hands. Mrs. Ruth's visits grew urgent. Preeclampsia, she confirmed. You need bed rest, maybe a hospital. Hospital. We couldn't afford it. Frank shrugged off her warnings. Women get sick, he said, disappearing again. My sisters took over, bringing food, washing clothes, their presence a lifeline. I lay in bed, whispering to my baby, promising a future I wasn't sure I could give. The river outside flowed on, indifferent to my pain, but its steadiness gave me resolve. This tale, my dears, is about facing the unbearable, about a mother's love rising above betrayal. The Willamette keeps moving, and so must we, through lies and loss, toward a strength we don't yet know. Stay with me as we face the darkest night, where love turns to violence and a heart fights to survive. The Willamette's dark waters churned under a starless Portland sky, their restless flow a mirror to the terror rising in my chest. I was 9 months pregnant, my body heavy with the child I'd vowed to protect. It was October 1968, and our little house by the mill, once a sanctuary, had become a battlefield. Frank's betrayal, his affair with Marlene, his lies had stripped away the love I'd clung to, but nothing could prepare me for the horror that unfolded the night my son chose to come into the world. That night, the man I married became a monster, and my life shattered in ways I could never have imagined. Labor began on a humid afternoon, contractions rippling through me like waves on the river. Alone, I breathed through the pain, knowing first labors could stretch for hours. I sent the neighbor's boy to fetch Sarah, who arrived quickly, her eyes steady. It's early yet, she said, brewing cinnamon tea to ease me. We'll call Mrs. Ruth when it's time. The contractions grew stronger, the sky outside burning orange, then fading to black. I swayed through the pain, clinging to thoughts of my baby James or Lily. I whispered, promising love. Frank stumbled in near midnight, reeking of whiskey and cheap perfume, his eyes bloodshot. Sarah's face tightened, but I signaled her to stay quiet. What's she doing here? He slurred, pointing at my sister. I'm in labor, Frank, I said, my voice calm despite the pain. The baby's coming. He froze, staring at my belly as if seeing it for the first time. Sarah left to fetch water, giving us space, and in that moment Frank's mask fell. His face twisted with a cold anger I'd never seen, chilling me to the bone. I want to reach out, my dears, and hold space for your pain. Have you faced a moment when trust turned to fear? Share it in the comments. Your courage strengthens us all. Subscribe, hit the bell, and like this video to join our $500 giveaway. Details below. Your stories flow into mine like tributaries joining the Willamette. Alone with Frank, I felt the air shift. "So the boy's coming today?" he asked, his voice low, menacing. I nodded, a contraction gripping me. He sat on the bed, his weight too close, his eyes empty. "You know, Betty," he whispered, "I never wanted this child." His words hit like a blade, slicing through my heart. "What are you saying?" I gasped. "It's your son." He leaned closer, his breath sour. "I don't care. I've got plans, a new life with Marlene. She's carrying my child too, one I actually want." The confession poured out cold and calculated. He'd met Marlene months ago, planned to run to Seattle with her. "You're leaving us?" I asked, tears breaking free. "That's your problem," he said, shrugging. A contraction hit, and I groaned, clutching the bed. Frank didn't move, his gaze fixed, devoid of compassion. "Marlene's 3 months along," he added, each word a bomb. "A child I chose." Pain, physical and soul deep, overwhelmed me. But worse was coming. Sarah returned, her footsteps quick. Frank stood, announcing, "I'm going out." "Women's business." Sarah protested, but he slammed the door, leaving us. She held my hand, her face pale, as I sobbed out his confession. Marlene, the other child, his plan to abandon us. "He's not right," she said, her voice hard. She sent for Mrs. Ruth, who arrived and confirmed labor was progressing, though hours remained. Around midnight, Sarah left briefly to check on her own children, promising to return. Mrs. Ruth dozed in the living room, leaving me alone, swaying through contractions. Then the door creaked open. Frank's heavy steps, his whiskey-soaked stench filled the room. "Still no baby," he slurred, his voice thick with menace. "Go sleep, Frank," I said, fear rising. "You're drunk." He laughed, a sound that froze my blood, and sat on the bed, his bulk looming. "I thought today," he said, his eyes glinting, "if this boy doesn't make it, I'm free. No child support, no ties." Panic surged. "Frank, leave," I begged, my voice weak. "The midwife's here, Sarah's coming." His hand clamped over my mouth, his weight crushing my belly. "No one'll blame me if it's a complication," he hissed, pressing harder. Pain exploded, sharp and unbearable. I bit his hand, screaming, and he slapped me, my vision blurring. Mrs. Ruth's footsteps sounded, but before she reached me, Frank's fist struck my head. Darkness swallowed me, the last sensation, a warm gush between my legs, and a mother's desperate prayer for her child. I woke in Portland General Hospital, white walls and antiseptic air disorienting me. A nurse hovered, her face kind but grave. "Don't move, ma'am," she said. "You lost a lot of blood." "My baby, where was my baby?" I tried to speak, but only a moan escaped. The doctor came, his eyes heavy. "Mrs. Betty," he said, "you had a placental abruption, likely from trauma. We couldn't save your son." The world collapsed. My boy, my James, gone before I could hold him. Grief consumed me, a wail tearing from my throat until darkness reclaimed me. This tale, my dears, is the darkest stretch of my river, where love became violence and loss carved a wound that never fully heals. The Willamette flows on, and so must we, through horror and heartbreak, toward a dawn we can't yet see. Stay with me as we navigate the aftermath, where a broken heart begins to find its strength. The Willamette's gentle ripples caught the morning light outside my childhood bedroom window, but no beauty could touch the void inside me. I was 17, back in my father's house in Portland, my body healing from a hospital stay, but my soul shattered by the loss of my son. It was late 1968, and the city moved on. Mills hummed, church bells rang while I lay in a fog of grief, the weight of Frank's violence and betrayal crushing me. Yet in this darkness, the love of my family and a flicker of resilience began to pull me from the abyss, one painful step at a time. The hospital had kept me for 2 weeks, my body teetering on the edge from hemorrhage and preeclampsia. Sarah told me what happened that night. She'd returned to find Mrs. Ruth, frantic blood pooling beneath me. A neighbor helped rush me to Portland General, but Frank was gone. His clothes vanished from our home. "The police are looking," Sarah said, her voice hard with anger, "but he's a ghost." Lying in my old bed, surrounded by familiar quilts, I whispered, "He killed my son," the words venom and truth. My father, Gerald, sat by me, his fisherman's hands gripping mine. "He'll pay, girl," he vowed, but justice felt hollow against my loss. Grief was a tidal wave drowning me in memories of a boy I'd never hold, James, with his imagined smile. Nightmares woke me, Frank's contorted face, the pain of his blows, the warm gush of loss. My sisters took turns at my side, their chatter a lifeline, but the emptiness was relentless. "You're still here," Sarah would say, brushing my hair. "That's enough for now." I wanted to believe her, but each dawn felt like a betrayal, the world spinning without my son. The river outside flowed on indifferent, yet its steadiness whispered of survival. I want to connect with you, my dears. Have you ever faced a loss that stole your light? Share a moment in the comments how you kept going or who held you up. Subscribe, hit the bell, and like this video to join our $500 giveaway. Details below. Your stories flow into mine like streams joining the Willamette's endless current. My father's house was my refuge, its creaking floors and familiar smells a tether to the girl I'd been. He'd sit on the porch, pipe, smoke curling, and tell me stories of my mother, her strength through fever and loss. "You've got her, fire," he said, his voice rough with pride. My sisters brought food, washed my clothes, and forced me to eat when all I wanted was to disappear. Sarah, fierce as ever, tracked the police's search for Frank, but leads fizzled rumors of Seattle, Canada, nothing solid. Each dead end stoked my anger, a dark flame I wasn't ready to release. Physically, I mended slowly. The doctor called my survival a miracle, but it felt like a curse. My body bore scars, aches in my joints, a weakness that lingered, but my heart was the true casualty. I'd sit by the window, watching the river, tracing the path my son would never walk. My sisters tried to distract me, bringing sewing or gossip, but their eyes held pity I hated. "You'll find a way," my eldest sister Mary said, her hand on mine. I nodded, but the path ahead was cloaked in fog. One morning, 3 months after the tragedy, I woke with an urge I couldn't explain to go to St. Sebastian's Church. I hadn't been since losing my son, my faith buried under anger at a God who'd let this happen. But that day, I dressed quietly and walked the few blocks, the river breeze sharp on my face. The church was nearly empty, just old women praying rosaries, the sacristan polishing brass. I slipped into the last pew, hidden in shadow, not knowing why I'd come, but feeling a pull like a current guiding me. The young priest, Father Michael, spoke of pain in his homily, not the bodies, but the souls, the kind that seems endless. "Sometimes there's no answer," he said, his Midwest accent soft. "But pain doesn't have to be your story's end." Tears slipped down my cheeks unbidden. His words weren't a cure, but they cracked the ice around my heart, letting in a sliver of light. I stayed after Mass alone in the quiet, the stained glass casting colors on my hands. Something shifted, small but real, a whisper that I wasn't as alone as I felt. Father Michael approached, his steps gentle. "May I sit, Betty?" he asked. I nodded, and we talked not of God, but of loss, my son, Frank's betrayal. He listened, no judgment, no platitudes, just presence. "Your pain's real," he said, "but sharing it might lighten the load." His words planted a seed, one I didn't yet know would grow. I began returning to church, not for faith, but for community, a place to exist, without explaining my grief. The river outside kept flowing, and I began to sense I could too, even if I didn't know how. This tale, my dears, is about surviving the unsurvivable, about finding flickers of hope in the darkest depths. The Willamette moves forward, and so must we through grief and rage toward a strength born of love and loss. Stay with me as we follow this path where a broken woman begins to rebuild one fragile step at a time. The Willamette's steady flow outside my father's house was a quiet companion, its rhythm urging me to keep moving even as grief clung like damp Portland mist. I was 18 a year past the loss of my son, living in the shadow of Frank's violence and betrayal. It was 1969 and Portland buzzed with millwork and Sunday hymns, but my world had shrunk to survival. The church, once a place I'd abandoned, became my anchor, and through it, I found a path to healing, not in grand revelations, but in small acts of purpose that began to stitch my broken heart back together. St. Sebastian's Church, just blocks from home, was where I'd stumbled after that dark night drawn by an urge I couldn't name. Father Michael, the young priest with a Midwest twang, had welcomed me without pushing his homily about soul-deep pain striking a chord. I returned each Sunday not for God, but for the quiet, the faces that didn't pity me, the chance to sit in a place where my loss didn't define me. Father Michael would linger after Mass, offering a few words, never about forgiveness, just presence. "You're not alone, Betty," he'd say, and those words became a lifeline. I want to reach out, my dears, and hear your stories of finding light in dark times. What's pulled you through a loss? Share in the comments, maybe a person, a place, or a small act that mattered. Subscribe, hit the bell, and like this video to join our $500 giveaway, details below. Your stories flow into mine like streams joining the Willamette's endless current. One Sunday, Father Michael introduced me to Mrs. Zuleika, a 70-year-old widow who ran a parish charity group. Her eyes, sharp but kind, saw past my grief. "Come help us Thursday," she said, no pressure, just an invitation. "We're packing food for flood families." I hesitated, what could I broken as I was offer? But her warmth pulled me in. That Thursday, I joined a handful of women in the parish hall, sorting canned goods and clothes. I worked quietly, my hands moving while my heart stayed guarded, but the act of doing something for others sparked a flicker of purpose. Week by week, I returned. Mrs. Zuleika noticed my knack for organizing and asked me to handle records. "You've got good hands," she said, her smile like sunlight. The group became a haven, women sharing stories, recipes, worries. I began to speak first about small things, then about my son, my voice trembling but growing steadier. The pain didn't vanish, but it shared space with moments of connection. I'd walk home along the river, the Willamette's flow, a reminder that life could move forward, even scarred. My father Gerald saw the change. "You're finding your feet?" he said, pipe smoke curling his pride, quiet but fierce. My sisters, especially Sarah, cheered me on, though they still chased rumors of Frank's Seattle, Chicago, nothing solid. The police had all but given up, and my thirst for justice burned, but it was starting to exhaust me. I wanted to live, not just survive. I took a job as an administrative assistant at the municipal school, a small step that felt like a leap. The steady work, filing papers, greeting parents, gave me structure, and the river's view from my desk offered peace. The school brought me closer to children, a bittersweet gift. Their laughter stung, reminding me of the son I'd lost, but their energy was a balm. I'd help with small tasks, tying shoes, wiping tears, and found myself softening. One boy, Tommy, a scrappy 7-year-old, would linger by my desk, telling wild stories. "You listen like you mean it," he said once, and I realized I did. These children, with their own invisible hurts, were teaching me to feel again, to see beyond my pain. I moved out of Father's house, renting a room from an elderly widow. It was small, a bed, a chair, a window facing the river, but mine. I could cry without worrying anyone, arrange my books my way, begin to reclaim who I was. Nights were still hard dreams of my son waking me, but I'd sit by the window, the Willamette's murmur soothing me. I started sewing again, making curtains, then clothes for the charity group's kids. Each stitch felt like mending something in me, too. Father Michael remained a steady presence. We'd talk after Mass sometimes about my loss, sometimes about Portland's changing skyline. He never pushed faith, just offered space to be. "You're building something new," he said one day, his eyes kind. I wasn't sure what, but I felt it, a shift from surviving to living. Mrs. Zuleika's group grew, and I took on more, coordinating deliveries, writing thank you notes to donors. The work filled my days with purpose, my nights with less despair. Portland was changing, the mills still strong, but new businesses sprouting, the river carrying barges of progress. I walked its banks, feeling the city's pulse, and my own, both scarred, but alive. My anger at Frank lingered, but it was no longer my only fire. I was learning that pain could coexist with purpose, that loss didn't have to be the end. The river flowed on, and I was beginning to flow with it toward a life I couldn't yet see, but was starting to believe in. This tale, my dears, is about the slow climb from darkness, about finding meaning in small acts and kind hands. The Willamette keeps moving, and so must we, through grief's weight, toward a purpose that heals. Stay with me as we follow this path, where a wounded heart begins to build anew. The Willamette's soft ripples reflected Portland's changing skyline, a city growing beyond its mill town roots, much like I was growing beyond my pain. I was in my early 20s, the early 1970s, a teacher's assistant at the municipal school. My days filled with children's chatter and the quiet purpose of helping others. The loss of my son in 1968 still ached, a wound that would never fully heal. But the church, my work, and the river's steady flow had taught me to carry it differently. Now, a new chapter was unfolding, one of purpose and unexpected love, as I built a life I hadn't dared imagine. My work at the school was a lifeline. I organized records, helped parents, and guided children through small struggles, spilled milk, lost pencils, broken hearts. Their resilience stirred something in me, reminding me of my own. I'd started a tutoring group for kids whose parents worked late, a handful of them gathering in a spare classroom. We'd read, draw, or just talk, their trust in me a gift. Rosie, a 6-year-old with a single mother, became my shadow, her questions. "Why do you look sad, Miss?" cutting deep but opening me up. "I lost someone," I told her, and her small nod, wise beyond her years, bonded us. "I want to connect with you, my dears." What's a moment when helping someone healed you? Share it in the comments, maybe a kind act or a child's words. Subscribe, hit the bell, and like this video to join our $500 giveaway, details below. Your stories weave into mine like the Willamette tying Portland's shores together. St. Sebastian's Church remained my anchor. Father Michael's quiet wisdom and Mrs. Zuleika's charity group gave me community, a place to belong. I coordinated food drives, my knack for details earning praise. "You're a natural, Betty," Mrs. Zuleika said, her eyes twinkling. The work filled my heart, but the school called louder. I decided to become a teacher, a goal that meant night classes, long hours, and every penny saved. Father Michael helped me find scholarships, his faith in me a spark. "You're turning pain into purpose," he said, and I held those words close. In 1973, I met John Taylor, a widower in his 50s, volunteering at the school. He taught woodworking to older boys, his calloused hands shaping oak with care. Quiet with a river-deep calm, he'd nod hello, his eyes kind but guarded. We started talking about the kids, Portland's growth, the books we loved. "Life's like a river," he said once, sipping coffee after a class. "You don't fight the current, you learn to navigate it." His words resonated, echoing the Willamette's flow, and our talks became a ritual, simple but grounding. John's presence was different from Frank's, no charm, just steady honesty. He'd lost his wife years ago, no children, and lived alone by the river. We'd walk the Willamette's banks, sharing silences as often as words. I wasn't looking for love. Frank's betrayal had scarred me deep, but John's quiet strength softened my walls. He'd bring me small carvings, a bird, a fish, each one a gift of time, not flash. My sisters noticed Sarah teasing, "He's sweet on you, Betty." I brushed it off, but my heart stirred, cautious but curious. My tutoring group grew, parents contributing eggs or fruit in thanks. The principal gave us a dedicated room, and I poured myself into it, helping kids like Rosie read or dream beyond their struggles. Their progress, Tommy's first full sentence, Rosie's proud smile felt like healing. I studied at night, bleary-eyed, but determined, the river's murmur through my window, a reminder to keep going. My father, aging but proud, would visit, his pipe smoke curling. "You're making a difference," he said, his voice thick. I was, but the ache for my son lingered, a quiet companion. In 1975, a rumor about Frank surfaced. A merchant saw him in Seattle selling appliances. My father and brother-in-law chased it, but he'd vanished again. The news reopened old wounds, but I was different now. Hatred no longer defined me. My students, my purpose did. John, sensing my unrest, invited me to a riverside picnic. We sat on a blanket, the Willamette sparkling, and he listened as I spoke of my son, my anger. "You're more than what he took," he said, his hand brushing mine. That touch, gentle and real, marked a shift. By 1978, I graduated as a teacher, my father's tears at the ceremony, a memory I cherish. The school hired me full-time, and I taught children others overlooked, those with rough edges or hidden hurts. I saw myself in them, broken but fighting, and gave them patience I'd once needed. John and I grew closer, our friendship deepening into something neither of us named. We'd dine at small cafes, watch the river at dusk, his stories of woodworking and loss weaving into mine of teaching and survival. Love, I was learning, could be quiet, built on trust, not promises. Portland was booming, new buildings rising, but the river remained my constant. I'd walk its banks, feeling my son's presence, not as pain, but as part of me. John joined me sometimes, his silence a comfort. "You've built something beautiful," he said one evening, the city lights dancing on the water. I was beginning to believe him, my life no longer just a scar, but a tapestry of loss and love, woven with purpose. This tale, my dears, is about rebuilding from ashes, about finding love and meaning where pain once ruled. The Willamette flows on, and so must we, through loss's shadow, toward a life that holds both. Stay with me as we near the end, where closure and peace find their place by the river. The Willamette's waters gleam under Portland's twilight, their eternal flow a mirror to the life I've woven from pain and purpose. I'm 73 now in 2025, a retired teacher sitting on my porch, the river's murmur blending with birdsong as I sip coffee and crumble a blueberry muffin. The loss of my son in 1968. Frank's betrayal and the long road since have shaped me, but they don't define me. Through teaching love and an unexpected letter, I've found peace, not the absence of scars, but a harmony born of living, fully loving deeply, and choosing hope each dawn. This is my story's end, my dears, but also a beginning for anyone seeking light after darkness. My teaching years were my heart's work. By the 1980s, I was known as Teacher Betty, dedicated to children with learning struggles or hidden wounds, kids like I'd been broken but resilient. I'd guide them through letters or fractions, but more, I gave them belief. Rosie, my little shadow from the tutoring days, grew up, became a nurse, and still visits her kids, calling me Grandma Betty. The municipal project I coordinated for vulnerable youth grew, serving hundreds, earning awards. In 1997, I led it, pouring my pain into purpose, helping children society overlooked. Their small victories, reading a book, trusting again, were my healing. John Taylor. My quiet love was my partner in this life. We'd met in 1973, his woodworking classes a gift to my students. Our bond grew slowly, rooted in shared silences by the Willamette, his carvings, birds, fish, a language of care. In 1999, we moved in together, buying a riverside home with space for his workshop. No marriage, just a commitment stronger than paper. We'd host Sunday barbecue salmon, grilling my blueberry pie a hit. John's steady presence taught me love could be safe, not a mask for shadows. He'd hold my hand watching the river and say, "You're enough, Betty." I believed him. In 1995, a letter from Marlene Frank's mistress brought closure I hadn't sought. A private investigator delivered it at my school, her words scrawled in fading ink. She'd died of cancer, but before she'd confessed, Frank, drunk and violent, had fled with her to Seattle after my son's death, not out of love, but fear. He'd died in 1975, a drunken fall, leaving her to raise their son, Gabriel, alone. Gabriel, a pediatrician, never knew his father's crime, but his life of saving children felt like a strange redemption. A photo of him smiling at 4 echoed Frank's eyes, but not his heart. He paid in ways you can't imagine, Marlene wrote, not asking forgiveness, just truth. I sat by the river that night, tears falling, not for her, but for the cycle's end Frank's evil hadn't won. I want to connect, my dears. What's brought you peace after pain? Share in the comments a moment, a person, a choice. Subscribe, hit the bell, and like this video for our $500 giveaway, details below. Your stories join mine, like the Willamette's tributaries, flowing together. In 2003, Gabriel's daughter, Gabriella, found me. A young doctor from New York, she'd uncovered her grandmother's diary, piecing together my story. At our Riverside home, she shared photos Gabriel as a boy, a teen, a father, his life a testament to good, rising from ashes. He broke the cycle, she said, her voice thick. We talked for days, her presence a bridge between our pasts. She volunteered with my project, her medical skills a gift to our kids. We've stayed close, her visits a reminder that pain can birth unexpected connections. John's death in 2019 after a cancer battle was a quiet grief softened by our 20 years of love. He passed, holding my hand, our home filled with friends. I mourned, but gratitude tempered the loss. Gratitude for his laughter, his carvings, our river walks. I kept our routines, tending his plants, watching the Willamette's sunset glow. My talks for women in crisis grew first in churches, then online during the 2020 pandemic. My niece Marianne taught me to use a smartphone, and soon my story reached women across America, their messages. You gave me hope, fueling my purpose. In 2015, I published a book, no bestseller, but a beacon for those in pain. It's used in my project's support groups, helping mothers rebuild. At 73, I live alone in our Riverside home, not lonely, but full. Former students, Gabriella, my sister's families, fill my days. I still speak, sharing how pain can become purpose, how love can betray, but also heal. The river, my constant, carries my son's memory, not as anguish, but as part of me, honored in every child I've helped, every heart I've touched. Life, my dears, is a river, calm, turbulent, but always moving. My faith, grown slow, like a seed in St. Sebastian's pews, isn't blind, but fierce, trusting life's capacity to mend. I've learned our stories don't end in tragedy, but flow on, finding new paths. Keep sharing yours, hit like, subscribe, comment with where you're from, or a spark of your life. The Willamette runs eternal, and so do we, carrying our scars, our loves, our hopes, toward a dawn that always comes.